I've been thinking a lot recently about the main purpose of the seemingly constant culture wars that we've been dealing with the last few decades. Every election season, there's some social issue under attack. Not long ago, the culture wars were over gay marriage.
I'm a Massachusetts parent, helplessly watching public schools teach my son that gay marriage is okay.
Islam.
What we can tell you with certainty is that Barack Obama has deep emotional ties to Islam.
Drugs.
Today, there's a drug and alcohol abuse epidemic in this country, and no one is safe from it. Not you, not me, and certainly not our children, because this epidemic has their names written on it.
Today, I'm sure you're all aware that the trans and non-binary community are under attack by conservative politicians. While it's easy to assume these politicians just hate LGBTQ+ people and want to attack us needlessly, there appears to be another reason for this. Culture wars, in a lot of ways, are a distraction from the main issues for a particular base of voters they're trying to reach. Hi, I'm Kristen, and I'm just shouting out to space and hoping somebody hears. The United States is an economic mess with corruption in business and government. We have little funds for education and healthcare, but endless cash flowing into the military-industrial complex and political campaigns. Climate change is ravaging all parts of the country with extreme weather. The infrastructure is falling apart. The cost of living is skyrocketing while wages stagnate. Gun violence is rapidly increasing. Yet here we are arguing over whether or not people who don't fit into gender binaries are allowed to play sports, use bathrooms, or simply live openly. Our system of politics is broken. With the Senate, every state has equal representation, which means the states with less people have more say in our government. California gets 2 representatives for 38 million people, while another 38 million people living in 19 different states get 38 senators. With the House, population and gerrymandering, or the drawing of districts for political gain, largely dictates which districts have more or less political power. So on average, each person living in a densely populated area has less political power with their vote than somebody living in a rural or isolated area. This means that all of those people living far away from many different races, gender presentations, sexualities, and political viewpoints have more control in our government. These people, mostly white evangelical Protestants, are often the same people who are easily moved to the polls over these culture wars. Because conservative politicians are already at a disadvantage in terms of voters, they hold on tight to all the groups they have. They use our minority groups as a hidden enemy to scare their voters to the polls. Both Donald Trump and George W. Bush lost the popular vote in their respective elections for president. But the way the system is set up allowed both of these men to become president. They both also use culture wars to rile up their base, without which losing is almost guaranteed. Unfortunately, the anti-trans movement is the latest enemy used now to encourage political action from people who may otherwise stay home over other environmental or economic issues. This relatively small voting group, around 15% of the population, is an important one for conservatives. They are loud and they gain lots of attention. They make up around half of the conservative voting base. These people also tend to have larger amygdalas, which is the fear center of the brain. This is one of the bigger differences between people on the right and the left of politics. Fear is a huge driver for this conservative base, but when the big bad never comes, politicians have to keep finding new things to freak out about, like drag queens reading to children. I mean, really? Really? Come on.
Shoes on the drag queen go stomp, stomp, stomp.
I believe that hate isn't inherited, it's taught. So if we can teach these kids how to love and accept everybody, they'll definitely be the best generation that we could ever ask for.
My white shoes.
The fear factor is also why conservatives care so much about potential voter fraud and make it harder for people to vote by limiting voting places, by requiring IDs, and limiting the voting time frame. It plays up the fear of their voter base as well as limits their opponents from voting. They use every trick in the book to keep their power in our government. In my state, Florida, felons, which are mostly black men, would permanently lose their right to vote. But in 2018, a large majority of the state voted to enfranchise them again. Of course, Ron DeSantis effectively stymied this just about 6 months after by requiring that all fees be paid in order to vote. So for felons in Florida, voting is a pay-to-play system. In my opinion, most of the politicians pushing all of these anti-trans bills like Ron DeSantis do not really care about who can play sports. They aren't really that concerned over who goes to what bathroom. They don't really hate drag. The reason for this sudden extreme hatred is for political gain. Conservative politicians pick something every election season to harp on, mostly to drive poor, rural evangelical people to the polls, effectively convincing people to vote against their own economic interests for the sake of eliminating the newest threat to society. These politicians are also hoping to benefit from the constant media attention which worked well for Donald Trump previously. This is obviously horrible because real people are being hurt by the various culture wars. People who really do hate LGBTQ+ people in a dangerous way feel validated by these political movements.
Anyway, I've got...
Physical attacks on trans people have been rising since 2013, and trans people are already highly disadvantaged in our country. So to be adding more to that through these anti-trans bills is obviously a big problem. I do want to clarify, it's hard to know for sure if hate crimes against trans and non-binary people have gotten better or worse over a larger time frame because we haven't really been keeping track, not until 2013. It's likely tracking has gotten better over the last decade, meaning higher numbers, but before that, trans and non-binary people were dead-named and ignored. There are an unknown number of trans and non-binary people who have been silenced over the last century because people didn't care enough about their identities to know or to recognize them. There is even the trans or gay panic defense, where perpetrators of murders, hate crimes, robberies, and domestic violence towards trans and non-binary people would be legally justified and often have their sentences reduced by the courts. This defense is still being used in the majority of the states today, though at varying success rates. What we can hope for now is that this blatant attack from the conservative politicians also encourages LGBTQ+ people and their allies to become more politically active and to vote and be an active participant in government. We will need larger numbers to overcome this small minority of brainwashed zombies. Okay, that was a bit harsh. I'm sorry. I'm honestly frustrated. I mean, these people, they're voting against the rights of trans and non-binary people, but they will probably never be directly affected by these bills. They will likely never know someone personally who is suffering from their attacks. They are human too, just people who have lived in a bubble, and their ignorance is being weaponized by politicians to gain political power. Over the last decade, evangelicalism has dropped off massively. So for the remaining people, I have to believe there's the ability to be better. They just have to be given the chance to. The politicians, though, I'm not sure I see much good in them. Regardless of the latest hurdles, trans and non-binary people are being represented more and more in media today. Media allows people who would never know a trans or non-binary person to empathize with them. So more people have a chance to learn about the many different ways there are to live outside the male-female binary. Even in isolated and ignorant communities, people will see that we are just people too, and eventually become comfortable with these different identities. Things are changing. Things are getting better. We can see this just by looking 20 years back. Much of the language and media around trans people was far more toxic. Looking a little over 50 years back, there were trans and gay people being imprisoned for their identities. So we can see massive changes around the way society treats LGBTQ+ people.
Thad, you look like a freaking woman!
That when you're under this lens and they're judging your femininity, and in that moment when I can be found out, my life could be in danger.
Hello. Could you connect me to the Capitol Police? What are you doing in here?
Washing my hands.
Trans women as well as cis women, women in general, separating trans women and cis women, it makes us seem like we're other than and we're not. We're all sisters.
Like the thought of puberty, like this irreversible, forever fucking metamorphosis was just like fucking terrifying.
Change is painfully slow, but it is happening. We can make it happen faster by paying attention to what's going on and always going to the polls when you can to get these corrupt people out of government. Protesting and simple humiliation tactics may also help unaffected people realize how ridiculous the ideas of these anti-trans people really are. We've taken like 10 steps forward in the last century, and these latest attacks might be taking a few steps back, but I know we'll continue towards a more progressive world. It's easy to become apathetic in these times, but we need to fight back for the people most at risk because we know how fascism works. It relies on the silence and apathy of those unaffected. If you're interested in helping trans people keep their rights, there's a couple of organizations you can check out below. ACLU and the National Center for Transgender Equality. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this content and want to see more. People who really, oh, I'm sorry. Let's take a sip of your drink, yeah. First video jitters. Gotta take a drink. Okay.